She ironed his graduation gown the night before. She had been ironing his things for 8 years. His scrubs for the hospital rotations. His dress shirts for the interviews. His white coat when he got it in year 2 and cried in the kitchen, and she had held him and told him she knew he was going to get here. She had ironed that white coat herself. She had pressed every crease out of it with the same care she brought to everything, because that was who she was. A woman who did things properly. A woman who showed up. A woman who had worked the morning shift at the diner and the evening shift at the hospital reception desk and the weekend shift at the pharmacy for 8 years, so that the man she loved could become the doctor he had told her on their 3rd date he was going to be. She had believed him. She had built her entire life around that belief. She ironed his graduation gown on a Thursday night, and she hung it on the back of the bedroom door, and she went to sleep beside him for the last time without knowing it was the last time. The following afternoon, in front of 140 people, including both of their families and every person they had ever known together, he handed her an envelope. She thought it was a thank you card. It was not a thank you card. It was divorce papers. And the woman standing beside him when he handed them to her was his supervising attending physician. She had been in that hospital every day for the last 3 years. She had been in their lives the entire time. And she had been in this plan for longer than that. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments right now and hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let me take you all the way back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened in that parking lot on graduation afternoon, you need to understand who Angela Carter was before any of it started. You need to understand what 8 years of working 3 jobs looks like from the inside. And you need to understand how a woman can be completely present in a betrayal that has been living in her home for 3 years and not see it. Not because she was not paying attention, but because the performance she was watching was so complete and so carefully maintained that the only way to see through it was to be looking for something specific. Angela was not looking for anything specific. She was too busy keeping the lights on. Angela Carter was born in 1973 in Memphis, Tennessee. The second of 4 children. Her father was a postal worker who had worked the same route in the Midtown Memphis neighborhood for 26 years. He left the house at 5:45 every morning and he returned at 4:30 in the afternoon, and in the 26 years he worked that route he missed a total of 11 days. 9 of those were for his mother's illness and death. The other 2 were days when the weather conditions were severe enough that the Postal Service itself had suspended operations. He was not a man who talked about showing up as a value. He was a man who simply showed up. Every single day. Without announcing it as a virtue. Without requiring recognition for it. Simply as the operating condition of his life. Angela had absorbed this understanding so completely that she could not have told you where the lesson ended and the person began. They were the same thing. She was the daughter of a man who showed up, and she was therefore a woman who showed up, and that was all there was to it. Her mother was a woman named Ruth who worked part-time at a dry cleaning business on Summer Avenue and managed a household of 6 with the focused warmth of someone who had decided that the quality of a family's daily life was a project worth every bit of the attention she brought to it. Dinner was on the table at 6:30 every evening. The house was clean without being sterile. The children's school commitments were tracked and attended to with the same consistency that their father brought to his route. Ruth was not a woman who dramatized the work of maintaining a family. She simply maintained it, quietly and consistently and without requiring applause. Angela was the child who watched her mother most carefully. She watched the way Ruth moved through the house with a specific purposeful efficiency that never looked rushed. She watched the way Ruth managed the family finances in a small notebook she kept in the kitchen drawer. Every expenditure recorded. Every bill noted. Every savings contribution, however small, written down with the date and the amount and a running total. Angela asked her once why she kept the notebook when they had a bank account. Ruth said, "Because the bank knows what it took in. Only I know what it cost." Angela was 9 years old when Ruth said that. She did not fully understand it then. She understood it completely by the time she was 40. Angela graduated high school in 1991 in the top 12% of her class. College was not straightforward. Her father's postal salary and her mother's part-time income had kept the family stable and the children fed and clothed and present at their school activities, But there was not a college fund for any of the 4 children, and Angela was practical enough at 18 to understand the mathematics of this without resentment. She got a job at a hospital reception desk 3 weeks after graduation. She worked full-time for 2 years. She saved methodically. She enrolled in a community college healthcare administration program at 20 years old. She completed the program in 2 years while continuing to work 20 hours a week at the hospital desk. She was building toward something. She had always been building toward something. The specific thing she was building toward was not always clear to her, but the building itself was constant. The habit of moving forward toward something better than where she currently was had been installed in her so early and so thoroughly that it operated independently of any particular destination. She met David Carter in the fall of 1995 at a community event in Memphis. She was 22 years old. He was 24. He was in his first year of pre-medical studies at the University of Memphis. He was tall and well-spoken and had the specific energy of a man who had found his direction and was moving toward it with a confidence that was not arrogance, because it was not about other people. It was simply about the thing he was building and how certain he was that he was going to build it. He wanted to be a cardiologist. He had wanted this since he was 14 years old and had sat beside his grandfather's hospital bed in the days before the old man died of a heart attack and had asked the doctor what could have been done differently, and had listened to the doctor's answer with the specific quality of attention that some people only discover in themselves at moments of enormous loss. He had not forgotten the doctor's answer. He had carried it with him for 10 years, and it had become the engine of everything he was studying and building toward. Angela had listened to him talk about cardiology on the evening they met with the specific attention of a woman who was evaluating not the content of what was being said but the quality of the commitment behind it. She asked him precise questions. He answered them without deflecting. He did not perform certainty. He was simply certain. She walked away from that first conversation thinking, this man is going to become what he says he is going to become. The question is what it is going to cost and who is going to be beside him while he is paying that cost. She did not know yet that the answer to both halves of that question was going to be the same. 8 years. They dated for a year before David applied to medical school. The application process itself was expensive. The MCAT preparation courses. The application fees for 12 schools. The travel costs for interviews. Angela had helped cover some of these costs from her savings without David asking and without making it a conversation. She had simply noticed what was needed and covered it the way her father had noticed what his route needed and covered it every day for 26 years. They were accepted to 2 programs. The one David wanted was the more expensive of the 2. The financial aid package was not sufficient. His family could contribute a portion. Angela's savings could contribute another portion. There was still a gap. They sat at the kitchen table of the apartment David shared with a roommate on a Sunday afternoon, and they looked at the numbers together. David said, "I do not think I can make this work." Angela said, "Let me think about it." She went home. She spent 3 days with a notebook and a calculator working through every version of the numbers she could construct. Then she came back to David and she said, "I have a plan." She laid it out. 3 jobs. Her hospital administration position, which she would keep. A morning shift at a diner that started before 6, which she would add. A weekend shift at a pharmacy near their apartment, which she would add. The combined income across the 3 positions would close the gap and cover their joint living expenses and leave a small buffer for the specific ongoing costs of a medical student's life. David looked at the numbers. He looked at her. He said, "Angela, I cannot ask you to do this." She said, "You are not asking me." She said, "I am deciding." He said, "It is 8 years." She said, "I know how long it is." She said, "I have worked the numbers." She said, "This is how we do it." He said, "We." She said, "Yes." She said, "We." They married in the spring of the following year. A small ceremony with both families and close friends. Angela wore a white dress she had made alterations to herself the week before the wedding because the alterations shop wanted $200, and she needed that $200 for David's first semester textbooks. She made the alterations herself in the evenings after her shifts. She had never done formal alterations before. She watched 3 tutorial videos and she practiced on a piece of similar fabric, and then she did the alterations on the dress, and when she put it on the morning of the wedding it fit exactly as she needed it to fit. She was 23 years old and she was marrying a man who was going to be a doctor, and she was going to work 3 jobs for 8 years to make sure it happened, and she had made the alterations on her own wedding dress the week before the ceremony because the $200 was needed for his textbooks, and this was simply the mathematics of the life she had decided to build, and she was inside it completely, and she was not performing any of it for anyone. The first year of medical school was the hardest year of David's academic life and one of the most demanding years of Angela's. The volume of material in the first year of medical school is not something that people outside medicine fully appreciate until they are watching someone they love be consumed by it. David studied between 14 and 16 hours a day. He studied on weekends. He studied over Christmas. He was present in their shared life in the minimum amount that the human need for sleep and food and occasional human contact required, and Angela managed the household and covered the finances and made sure there was food in the apartment and clean clothes in the closet, and the specific operational infrastructure of a shared life was maintained without requiring his attention because his attention was fully occupied by something that needed all of it. She did not resent this. She had understood what she was agreeing to before she agreed to it. She had worked the numbers. She knew what 14 to 16 hours of studying looked like in terms of what it left for the hours it was not studying. She had planned for this. She managed it without complaint. She rose at 4:45 every morning for those 8 years. She needed to be at the diner by 5:45, and the diner was 20 minutes from the apartment on foot. She walked it in all weather because they had one car and David needed it for his hospital rotations. She walked it in Memphis summer heat and in January cold, and on the mornings when it rained she had a specific rain jacket that she had bought for $12 at a discount store in the first year, and that she wore until it had been repaired at the hood seam 3 times before she finally replaced it with a slightly better one in the 5th year. She worked the morning shift at the diner from 5:45 until 11. She walked to her hospital administration position, which was 4 blocks from the diner, and worked there until 5 in the afternoon. On Saturdays and Sundays, she worked the pharmacy shift from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. She had 2.5 days off per week. She used one of those half days for grocery shopping and the other half day for the household administrative tasks that accumulated through the week. She used 1 full day for rest and for David. She gave that full day entirely to the person she was building this life with. She asked for nothing in return. She simply gave it. She was not a woman who did not have a private life inside all of this. She had a group of women she had been friends with since her community college years, who she met for breakfast on the 2nd Saturday of every month at a spot near the diner where the staff knew her and brought her coffee without being asked. These women were the consistent witnesses to Angela's life in the way that the close friends of exceptionally capable women often are. They saw what she was doing and they admired it, and they also worried about it in the specific way that women who love someone worry about the things that someone is giving to another person without receiving equivalent return. They did not always say this to Angela directly. They said it to each other in the parking lot after the breakfasts. Angela would not have heard it differently if they had said it to her directly. She had made her assessment and her decision, and she was inside it, and she was not interested in managing doubt about it. She was too busy working 3 jobs. David got his white coat in the 2nd year of medical school. This is the ceremony where medical students receive the white coat that marks their formal entry into clinical medicine. It is a significant milestone. For David, it was enormous. He cried when the coat was placed on his shoulders. He cried in a way that Angela had not seen him cry before. Not the frustrated tears of a difficult exam period or the exhausted tears of a particularly brutal rotation. These were the specific tears of a man who has been moving toward something for a very long time and has just arrived at a visible marker of the distance he has traveled and the distance he still has to go. He came home from the ceremony and he sat at the kitchen table, and he was still crying when Angela came in from the pharmacy shift and found him there. She sat down beside him. She did not say stop crying. She did not say it is going to be fine. She sat beside him and she waited until he was ready to speak. He said, "I do not know how to thank you." She said, "You do not have to thank me." She said, "This is us." He said, "I know." He said, "I know it is us." He said, "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that I know it." She believed him. She put her hand on his and she believed every word of it. The white coat was hanging on the back of the kitchen chair. She ironed it the following morning before she left for the diner. She pressed every crease out of it with the same care she brought to everything. The step 1 board exam failure happened in the second year. He had called her from the examination center. She had been on her lunch break from the diner standing in the alley behind the restaurant in the heat, and she had talked to him for 40 minutes. She had not told him it was going to be okay in the automatic way that people say things are going to be okay when they do not know if they are. She had said specific things. She had said the failure is information. She had said the information tells you what the 4 months between now and the second attempt need to contain. She had said let us figure out what those 4 months need to contain. He had stopped crying somewhere in the middle of that conversation and started talking about the specific subjects where the gap was widest between his knowledge and what the exam required. By the end of the 40-minute call, they had a plan. Not an emotional plan. Practical plan. The kind of plan that Angela built. Specific and structured and grounded in the actual requirements of the situation. He passed the second attempt with a score 12 points above the passing threshold. He called her when the results came through. She was in the middle of the hospital administration shift. She went to the break room. She listened to him on the phone. He said, "I did it." She said, "I know." She said, "I always knew it." She hung up and went back to her desk and completed the rest of the shift because the shift needed to be completed and there were 3 more hours in it, and that was simply what you did. She met Dr. Cheryl Hammond in the 3rd year of David's residency. Residency followed the 4 years of medical school and was the period of supervised clinical practice during which new doctors worked under the supervision of experienced attending physicians in their specialty. David was doing his residency in cardiology, which was what he had always intended, and the hospital where his residency was based was a major medical center in the city where they were living. Dr. Cheryl Hammond was an attending cardiologist who had been at that hospital for 11 years. She was 41 years old at the time Angela first encountered her. She had a competence that was visible and a social ease that made her comfortable in every room she entered. Angela met her at a hospital event for residents and their partners in the early weeks of David's residency. Dr. Hammond had introduced herself to Angela directly. She had remembered Angela's name at the next event. She had asked appropriate questions about Angela's work and her interests with the specific warm attention of a person who is very good at making the people they are talking to feel that they are being genuinely seen. Angela had liked her. She had told David she liked her on the drive home from the second event. She had said she seemed like a good mentor for him. David had said yes. He had said she was exceptional. He had said it in the way you say something about someone when you are managing the specific challenge of discussing someone in one context when you know them in a very different context. Angela had not heard anything in his voice that evening except what she was looking for, which was confirmation that his residency was going well and that he had good support around him. She had heard exactly that. She had gone to sleep that night satisfied with what she had heard. What was actually happening during those years was something that Angela would reconstruct in precise detail in the 18 months before graduation once she had begun to understand that there was something to reconstruct. Dr. Cheryl Hammond had been involved with David in a way that was not professional for a period that began approximately 3 years before the graduation ceremony. This was not a relationship that had developed in response to anything Angela had done or failed to do. It had developed because David had decided to allow it to develop, and Dr. Hammond had decided the same thing, and the specific combination of opportunity and proximity and a mutual willingness that neither of them had discussed openly with the person most affected by it had produced something that had been living inside Angela's marriage for 3 years while Angela was working 3 jobs and ironing his white coat and walking to the diner in the rain. Angela had begun to notice things in the 18th month before graduation. Not things that announced themselves as what they were. Things that produced a specific quiet unease that she had not been able to name, but that she had been unable to dismiss. A change in the quality of David's attention at home. Not a dramatic change. A subtle one. The specific way a person's attention shifts when part of it is occupied elsewhere. She had noticed it the way a woman who has been paying complete attention to a person for 8 years notices when the quality of that attention changes from the receiving end. She did not confront it. She was not ready yet. She was a woman who understood that what you observe is only useful if you can demonstrate what you observed, and she had not yet built the demonstration. She began building it. Not because she knew exactly what she was building toward. Because she was a woman who had worked in healthcare administration for 8 years and who understood that documentation built before you need it is the only documentation that tells the truth. She had discovered the billing irregularity by accident. She had been at a hospital professional development event, and she had overheard a partial conversation that had contained a reference to a specific billing code adjustment that did not correspond to the standard protocol she knew from her 8 years of healthcare administration work. She had said nothing. She had gone home and she had opened her laptop and she had spent 3 hours researching what she had heard. The research had led her to a pattern that was not visible in any single instance, but that became clear across a range of instances when examined through the lens of someone who understood medical billing protocol at the level she understood it. She had spent the following 18 months documenting this pattern from the information available to her through her professional access to industry billing databases and public hospital financial disclosures. She had done this quietly and methodically, and without telling anyone, including her lawyer, who she had not yet contacted. She was building the record before she knew she was going to need it. She was doing what her mother had taught her by example at the kitchen table with the small notebook in the drawer. Record accurately what you observe when you observe it. Only you know what it cost. She had found her lawyer 3 months before graduation day. Not by accident. Through a deliberate process of research and professional referral that she had conducted over several weeks using the same methodical approach she brought to everything. Vanessa Crawford had been practicing employment and civil law in the city for 17 years. She had a reputation in professional circles for taking on cases that other attorneys had decided were too complex and being right about them more often than those attorneys found comfortable. Angela had called her on a Tuesday morning in February and had explained in precise terms what she had and what she thought she might need. Vanessa had listened and asked 4 questions. Then she had said, "Come in on Thursday morning at 9. Angela had gone in on Thursday morning at 9 and had placed 2 files on the table. The financial documentation log covering 6 years of marriage, and the billing compliance file covering 18 months of observation. Vanessa had reviewed both files. She had said, "How long have you known?" Angela had said about the billing for 18 months. About the other thing longer. Vanessa had said, "How much longer?" Angela had said, "Long enough to build the file." Vanessa had said, "That is the right answer." She had said, "Let me tell you what we are going to do." The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in May. Angela had coordinated everything. The restaurant booking for 42 people. The family travel arrangements. The hotel accommodations for David's parents and his brother who had traveled from Atlanta. She had written and sent the dinner invitations herself. She had addressed the envelopes at the kitchen table 2 weeks before the ceremony, and she had not known as she sat at that table addressing those envelopes that David was sitting in a lawyer's office on the same afternoon filing the paperwork that was in the envelope he was going to hand her in the parking lot. He had filed 2 weeks before graduation. He had sat across from a divorce attorney while Angela was at the kitchen table addressing invitations for the dinner she had organized to celebrate the degree she had spent 8 years helping him earn, and he had signed the documents that would end their marriage. He had come home that evening. He had eaten the dinner she had made. He had gone to sleep in the bed beside her. He had done this for 2 weeks. He had done it without any visible change in the texture of his daily behavior that Angela had been able to detect. She had been looking. She had been looking for 3 months by then. She had not found it in the 2 weeks of the dinner invitation period. She had found it in the parking lot. She had ironed the graduation gown on Thursday evening. She had pressed every crease out of it. She had hung it on the back of the bedroom door and she had gone to sleep. She had risen at 4:45 on Friday morning because it was a workday and the diner shift started at 5:45 and the habit of 8 years does not suspend itself for celebrations. She had worked the morning shift at the diner. She had worked the hospital administration shift. She had come home in the afternoon and she had prepared herself for the ceremony the next day. She had tried on the dark green dress she had bought on sale 3 weeks earlier. She had looked at herself in the mirror and she had thought about 8 years. She had thought about the first year and the textbooks and the $200 alteration she had done herself on her own wedding dress. She had thought about the white coat and the 40-minute phone call in the alley. She had thought about the Step 1 exam and the study plan they had built together at the kitchen table. She had thought about every morning at 4:45 and every walk to the diner in the rain and every pharmacy Saturday and every hospital administration afternoon, and she had looked at herself in the dark green dress in the mirror, and she had thought, this is what it looks like when you are about to arrive at the place you have been building toward for 8 years. She had no idea that what she was actually about to arrive at was something entirely different from what she was seeing in that mirror. The ceremony itself was everything it was supposed to be. The auditorium was full. The families were seated. The music played. The graduates processed. David walked across that stage with the specific composed dignity of a man who has earned something and knows it and is receiving it in the appropriate spirit. Angela stood in the audience when he crossed the stage. She stood in the way that people stand when they are releasing something enormous through the act of applause. She was crying. Happy tears. The specific tears of a woman who has been holding something for 8 years and is finally allowed to put it down because the thing she was holding it for has arrived. She took photographs. She had David's mother on her left and David's aunt on her right, and she was between them in her dark green dress taking photographs and crying and completely unaware that the man she was photographing had a white envelope in the inside pocket of the graduation gown she had ironed the night before. The gathering in the parking lot afterward had the specific warm, chaotic energy of a graduation celebration where everyone is happy and loud and photographing everything and talking over each other. Angela was at the center of it in the way she was always at the center of things she had organized. Checking the restaurant timeline on her phone. Making sure David's parents had what they needed. Making sure the logistics were running correctly. She was wearing her dark green dress and she was holding her phone, and she was exactly what she had been for 8 years, which was the person who made everything run correctly and never required anyone to notice that she was doing it. David came to stand beside her at the edge of the parking lot. His parents were 20 feet away. His brother was nearby. Angela's mother had made the drive from Memphis for the ceremony and was standing talking to David's mother with the specific warmth of two women who have been connected through their children for enough years that they have found their own friendship inside that connection. There were approximately 40 people in the immediate area. David put his hand on Angela's arm. She turned toward him. He reached into the inside pocket of the graduation gown. He removed a white envelope. He held it out to her. She looked at it. She looked at him. There was something in his face that she noted without yet having the context to understand. She took the envelope. She opened it. She read the first line. She read the second line. She looked at the header of the document. She understood what she was holding. She looked up at him. He was looking to her left. She followed his gaze. Dr. Cheryl Hammond was standing 15 feet away. Civilian clothing. Not a person who had been invited to this gathering by Angela. She was looking at David. David was looking at her. The specific quality of two people looking at each other in a public space when they are managing the fact of what they know about each other in a context where other people do not yet know it. Angela looked at the document in her hands. She looked at the date at the top. 2 weeks ago. She looked at David's signature at the bottom. She looked at the date again. She had been addressing the dinner invitations at the kitchen table 2 weeks ago. She looked at Dr. Hammond 15 feet away. She looked at the document. She looked at David. Then she folded the papers. She placed them in the envelope. She placed the envelope in her bag. She looked at David's mother, who was 20 feet away and who had been watching the exchange for 30 seconds and who had understood enough of what she was seeing to have a specific expression on her face that Angela would remember for a long time. Angela said to David's mother, "I am sorry." She said, "There is going to be a change to the evening." She said, "I need to go." She said, "Please give everyone my apologies." Then she walked to her car. She got in. She started the engine. She pulled out of the parking lot at the correct speed. She drove through the city at the correct speed limit. She drove to the apartment. She parked in her space. She went inside. She sat at the kitchen table. She placed the envelope on the table in front of her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She scrolled to the contact she had added 3 months ago. She pressed call. It was a Saturday evening at 4:30. The phone rang 3 times. Vanessa Crawford answered. Angela said, "It has started." Vanessa said, "I will see you Monday morning at 9. She did not call her mother that Saturday evening. She did not call her sister. She did not call any of the women from the Saturday morning breakfast group. She sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of her, and she made herself a cup of tea, and she spent 4 hours going through the financial documentation log and the billing compliance file and making sure everything was in the order it needed to be in for the Monday morning meeting. She ate a sandwich at 9 o'clock. She went to bed at 10:30. She slept for 6 hours, which was not a full night but was adequate for what the following day was going to require. She rose on Sunday morning and she went through the documentation again. She organized it by category and by date, and she made a list of the specific questions she needed Vanessa to address in the Monday meeting. She made breakfast. She went for a walk. She came back. She spent the afternoon preparing for the week ahead. She was not doing any of this to manage her emotions. She was simply doing what she always did, which was focusing her attention on what the current situation required and providing it. The current situation required documentation and preparation and a clear head. She provided all three. The Monday morning meeting with Vanessa lasted 2 hours. Angela placed both files on the table. Vanessa reviewed the financial documentation log first. She asked 4 questions. Angela answered all 4 precisely and with references to the specific pages of the documentation that supported each answer. Vanessa reviewed the billing compliance file second. She spent 40 minutes on it. She asked 3 questions. Angela answered all 3. Then Vanessa put the file down and she looked at Angela across the conference table and she said, "You built this in 18 months while working 3 jobs and managing a marriage, and you did it without telling anyone." Angela said yes. Vanessa said, "That is the most disciplined thing I have seen in 17 years of this work." Angela said, "I had a good example." She was thinking about the small notebook in the kitchen drawer. Vanessa said, "I need to bring in 2 additional people on this." She said, a forensic accountant for the financial file and a healthcare billing specialist for the compliance file. She said both of these can be done on a contingency arrangement given the strength of the compliance case. She said the divorce proceeding is going to run separately. She said the financial documentation log is going to be the foundational document in the divorce. She said the billing compliance case is going to run through the hospital's compliance board and the state medical board and the federal billing oversight body simultaneously. She said, "I want to file all 3 on the same morning." She said, "I want to give no one time to prepare a response before they are managing responses to all 3 simultaneously." Angela said, "When?" Vanessa said, 14 months. She said, "I need the forensic accountant and the specialist to complete their analysis." She said, "We are going to do this correctly or we are not going to do it." Angela said, "Correctly." Vanessa said, 14 months. Angela said, "All right." The divorce proceedings began in the weeks following graduation. David's legal team was a firm in the city that specialized in protecting high net worth individuals in marital dissolution proceedings. They were experienced and they had a strategy built on a set of assumptions about Angela that turned out to be incorrect in every way that mattered. They had assumed she was a woman of limited financial resources who would accept a settlement significantly below her legal entitlement because the cost and energy of sustaining a contested proceeding would exceed what she was capable of providing. This assumption was wrong because Angela had been saving a specific amount of her income into a separate account for 4 years. A legal fund. She had not told David about it for the same reason she had not told him about the documentation log or the billing compliance file. She had not needed to tell him. It had been her private preparation for a possibility she had hoped was not coming and had prepared for anyway because she was the daughter of a woman who recorded what things cost and the daughter of a man who showed up regardless of what the weather was doing, and those 2 qualities together had produced a person who prepared for things in advance and then showed up for them when they arrived. The financial documentation log was introduced as evidence in the divorce discovery phase. David's attorney challenged its admissibility. He argued that it was a one-sided account of a mutual contribution arrangement. The judge reviewed the documentation. The judge admitted it. Not because the judge was making a finding about David's character. Because the documentation was accurate. Every entry was supported by a corresponding bank record or receipt or payment confirmation. Every total was verifiable. Every date was specific. The document said what it said, and what it said was verifiable, and the verifiability of it was the thing that David's attorney's challenge could not overcome. The document had been built to be verifiable. Angela had understood from the beginning that a document that could not be independently confirmed was not a document. It was a claim. She had not built claims. She had built a record. The forensic accountant who had been engaged by Vanessa produced a companion analysis to the financial documentation log. This analysis calculated the present value of Angela's financial contribution to the marriage over 8 years expressed in terms that the court could apply to the marital asset division. The number was not large in the context of what David was going to earn as a practicing cardiologist. It was not designed to be large. It was designed to be accurate. Angela had not asked for more than what was accurate. She had never been interested in more than what was accurate. The marital estate at the time of divorce was not enormous. David was still completing his residency. The significant income of a practicing cardiologist was ahead of him, not behind him. The forensic accountant had also produced an analysis of the anticipated future earning capacity that David's medical degree represented, and what portion of that degree had been funded by Angela's contributions. This was the analysis that David's attorney had pushed back on most forcefully. It was also the analysis that the court found most persuasive. A medical degree funded substantially by one spouse's labor represents a specific kind of marital asset whose future value does not disappear at the moment of dissolution simply because it has not yet been converted to income. This is a recognized principle in family law in multiple states. Vanessa had known this. Angela had not known it until Vanessa explained it, but once it was explained she had understood it immediately because it was consistent with the way she had always understood things. If you build something, it does not stop being yours because someone else is holding it. The billing compliance case was filed 14 months after graduation day. Vanessa filed simultaneously with the hospital's compliance board and the state medical board and the federal billing oversight body on the same morning. The complaint alleged systematic falsification of billing records at the hospital where David had completed his residency over a period of not less than 3 years. It included Angela's 18 months of documentation. It included the healthcare billing specialist's independent analysis, which had been built entirely on publicly available hospital financial disclosures and industry billing databases, and which confirmed the pattern Angela had identified with the additional authority of professional expertise and independent verification. The specialist's analysis identified the specific billing codes that had been adjusted, the specific dates of adjustment, the frequency of the adjustments over the 3-year period, and the aggregate financial effect of the adjustments. It was a precise document. It had been built to be precise. Dr. Cheryl Hammond's hospital attorney issued a statement through the hospital saying the allegations were without merit. The hospital's compliance board opened its own internal investigation on the day the complaint was filed. The state medical board opened a parallel investigation 3 days later. Dr. Hammond's hospital privileges were suspended on a precautionary basis pending the outcome of the investigations 14 days after the complaint was filed. In the world of hospital medicine, a precautionary privilege suspension is not a quiet administrative event. It is known within the institution within hours. It is known within the professional network of that specialty in the city within days. David was still completing the final months of his residency at that hospital. He walked through that hospital every day in the weeks after the suspension was announced, and he did so with the knowledge that Angela had filed the complaint and what the complaint contained and what it had produced. He had not known about the billing compliance file. He had not known it existed. He had not known that the woman he had handed divorce papers to in a graduation parking lot had been building a document for 18 months that would suspend his girlfriend's hospital privileges and trigger 3 simultaneous investigations. He had not known because Angela had not told him. She had not told him because she had understood from a very early age that the record you build before you need it is the only one that tells the truth, and that the time to tell the person who needs to not know about the record is after the record has done its work. The hospital compliance investigation took 11 months. At the conclusion of those 11 months, the compliance board issued a finding that confirmed the core allegations in Angela's complaint. The billing irregularities were confirmed as existing across a period of approximately 3 years. The financial amount they represented was confirmed. The finding was referred to the state medical board, which had been conducting its own parallel investigation, and to the federal oversight body. The state medical board proceeding concluded 7 months after the compliance board finding. Dr. Cheryl Hammond's medical license was suspended for 2 years with specific conditions attached to any reinstatement. The conditions included restitution to the hospital for the amounts affected by the billing irregularities, a mandatory supervised practice period of not less than 18 months following reinstatement, additional ethics training requirements, and a 5-year monitoring arrangement during which her billing practices would be subject to heightened review. The federal matter produced a separate settlement that was not made public but whose terms were described by Vanessa to Angela when they were finalized as meaningful. David and Dr. Hammond's relationship did not survive the investigations. This was not something Angela had worked toward. She had not filed the compliance complaint to end their relationship. She had filed it because she had observed something that constituted a compliance violation and she had documented it for 18 months and then she had reported it because it was the correct thing to do. What happened to the relationship was the natural consequence of what the investigation revealed and who the people inside the relationship turned out to be when that revelation arrived. The divorce settlement was finalized approximately 8 months after the proceedings began. The financial documentation log had performed the function for which it had been built. The court found in favor of Angela's framing of the marital financial contribution. The settlement included a lump sum payment to Angela reflecting her 8 years of financial contribution to David's medical education as calculated by the court-appointed forensic accountant. It included a division of the marital assets that was structured in accordance with the contribution analysis. It included a provision related to David's anticipated future earning capacity that was expressed as a formula rather than a fixed amount, and that would produce payments to Angela over a defined period during the early years of his cardiology practice. This provision was the one David's attorney had contested most aggressively. The court had found Vanessa's argument persuasive. The settlement was not designed to make Angela wealthy. It was designed to be accurate. It was accurate. Angela signed it on a Thursday morning in a law office conference room. She signed it with the same pen she had used to sign every significant document of her professional life. She put the pen back in her bag. She thanked Vanessa. She walked out of the conference room and took the elevator to the lobby and walked out into the morning air of a city she had lived in for 8 years, and she breathed it in and she moved forward. She bought a house in the 2nd year after the divorce. A 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood she had walked past every morning on her way to the diner for 5 years. She had walked past it in the dark at 5:15 in the morning when the neighborhood was quiet and the morning light was beginning to come through the trees on the street, and she had thought about living in a place like this. Not that specific house. The quality of that street in the early morning. The way the light came through those trees. She closed on the house on a Friday afternoon. She got the keys. She drove to the house. She parked in front of it. She sat in the car for a few minutes. She was not crying. She was simply present in the specific moment of something arriving that she had been moving toward for a long time through a route that had not looked anything like the route she had originally planned. Then she got out of the car. She walked up the front path. She put the key in the door. She pushed it open. She walked into her house. She went back to school in the 3rd year after the divorce. A bachelor's degree in healthcare management from an accredited program that offered evening and weekend classes. She completed it in 2 years while working full-time. She graduated on a Saturday morning. She attended the ceremony. She wore a dress she had chosen specifically for the occasion, and she had paid the full price for it without calculation. She walked across the stage. She received her degree. Nobody handed her an envelope. Nobody was standing at the edge of the parking lot. She walked across the stage and received what she had earned in the simple, unambiguous way that things should be received, which is as exactly what they are. She took one photograph of herself holding the degree. She sent it to her mother. Her mother called her immediately and cried. Angela said, "Mama, I am fine." Her mother said, "I know you are fine." She said, "I am crying because you have always been fine and because I have always known it, and because sometimes a mother needs to cry when her daughter does something that shows the world what the mother always knew." Angela said, "I love you, Mama." Her mother said, "I love you too, baby." She said, "Your father would have been proud." Angela said, "I know." She said, "I know he would have been." Angela Carter is now the Director of Compliance and Operations for a regional healthcare network that covers 4 states. She has held the position for 3 years. She was recruited for it specifically because of her expertise in healthcare billing compliance, which had become something she was known for in professional circles. This is the specific irony that she will tell you about if you ask her about it. The accident of professional knowledge that led her to overhear a partial conversation at a hospital event and recognize a billing irregularity that most people in that room would not have recognized. That accident had become the foundation of a professional reputation that had opened doors she had not been planning to open. She had not planned it. She had simply paid attention and documented what she observed and waited until she understood the full shape of something before she decided what to do with it. Those were not skills she had developed in response to what David had done to her. They were skills she had always had. He had simply provided the situation that made it necessary to use them in their most personal possible application. She was asked in a professional interview 2 years ago what she considered the most important skill she had developed in her career. She said documentation. The interviewer laughed slightly because it was not the answer he was expecting from a woman at her level. He said, "Could you expand on that?" She said, "The most important professional skill I have ever developed is the habit of recording accurately what I observe at the moment I observe it." She said, "Most people wait until they need the record to start building it." She said, "By that point, the record you build is shaped by what you need it to say rather than by what actually happened." She said, "The record built before you need it is the only record that tells the truth." The interviewer wrote this down. He used it as the opening quote of the article that was published the following month. Angela saw the article when a colleague sent it to her. She read the quote. She thought about the small notebook in the kitchen drawer on Summer Avenue in Memphis. She thought about her mother at the kitchen table with the pencil and the running totals. She thought about a girl watching a woman record what things cost because the bank only knew what it took in. She sent her mother the article with a message that said, "This one is for you." Her mother called her an hour later. She said, "Your father always said you were going to be something." Angela said, "He was talking about all of us, Mama." Her mother said, "He was talking about all of us, but he was looking at you when he said it." David Carter is practicing cardiology in the city where he completed his residency. Angela hears about him occasionally through professional connections. She does not seek out the information. When it arrives, she receives it as information and moves on. She does not have feelings about his life that require active management. She had managed her feelings about his choices in the period following graduation, and she had done it in the specific way she managed everything. By understanding it completely and then setting it down and moving forward. She had set it down. She had moved forward. She was not carrying it. People sometimes expect her to be carrying it. They expect that the 8 years and the 3 jobs and the parking lot and the graduation gown she ironed the night before should have left a weight she is still managing. She understands why people expect this. The expectation is reasonable from the outside. It is simply not accurate. Angela Carter has never been interested in carrying things that belong to other people. David's choices belonged to him. She had her own things to carry. She carried them properly and she moved. There is one detail that people always ask her about when they hear the story. They ask about the moment in the parking lot when she understood what was in the envelope. They ask what she felt. She says she felt the specific sensation of a large amount of information arriving very quickly and needing to be sorted correctly before any response was possible. They say, "But what did you feel?" She says that is what she felt. They usually laugh because they think she is deflecting. She is not deflecting. She is describing accurately what happened in those specific seconds. She has always been more interested in accurate description than in the version of events that produces the response the listener is looking for. That quality had been present in her before David, and it was present in her after David, and it was going to be present in her long after this story stopped being the story most people knew her for. She was not the story of what he did to her. She was the story of what she built before he did it and what she built after. That distinction mattered to her. It was the only version she was interested in telling. She still rises early. Not at 4:45 anymore. The diner shift is 9 years behind her. But early. She makes coffee before the sun is up. She sits at the table in her house and she goes through the day's priorities the way her mother went through the household notebook at the kitchen table on Summer Avenue. Every significant commitment noted. Every expenditure recorded. Every savings contribution written down with the date and the amount and a running total. The bank knows what it took in. Only she knows what it cost. She knows what everything has cost. She has always known. She intends to keep knowing. She intends to keep building. She has always been building something. The difference now is that every brick of what she is building is entirely hers. Every single one. and nobody is going to hand her an envelope at the end of it. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer in the comments. Angela built her financial documentation log for 6 years before she ever needed it. She built the billing compliance file for 18 months before she filed it. She did both of these things before she knew for certain that she was going to need either of them. She simply understood that the record you build before you need it is the only one that tells the truth. I want to ask you this. Is there something in your life right now that you are observing but not recording? Something that might matter later that you are keeping only in your memory, which is the least reliable place to keep anything important? Think about that. Drop your answer in the comments below. Tell me where you are watching from tonight. Texas, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, California, New York. Drop your state. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notification bell. Because next week I am going to tell you about a man who gave his brother his kidney to save his life and discovered 2 years later what his brother had been doing while he was still recovering from surgery. That story is coming next week. Do not miss it.